At this point, I had quit my job as a grave digger. I have moved to the big city in Chicago, and I'm just trying to make it as best I can as a lounge singer. I have now left the story as a woman in the 60s.
Doing a pretty decent job.
Thank you.
But yeah, this is not the happiest part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple bridges that connect Point Pleasant to other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio being one of them. There's the Silver Bridge that connects Gallipoli to Point Pleasant. It was rush hour. There was a ton of vehicle activity on the bridge,
mm-hmm.
and whenever you have a ton of traffic, things get clogged up. So there were a bunch of cars just clogging up the Silver Bridge, and the night of the 15th, it got to be too much for the bridge, and one of the I-beams snapped, and the bridge collapses and takes down everything on the bridge, which ends up killing 46 people. It was by all accounts just a horrendous tragedy, and they found out later after they got everything up from the river and stuff. They found that it came from a single hairline fracture in one of the I-beam pins, and it was something that people had come in to make sure the bridge was up to code,
mm-hmm.
check things out, make sure that everything was structurally sound, but this fracture was just so small it was almost invisible. Like there was hardly any way they could have really caught this.
Yeah, and you get cold temperatures. It's December. Metal's more inclined to fracture than bend.
The other thing is the bridge was built when Model Ts were being built. It was built with those in mind for the foot traffic and the wheel traffic on there. And by the 60s, cars were just a steel boat on wheels at that time. So
I almost wonder what the average difference, even between now and the 60s, in weight. I mean, that was the boat cart days. Those are the biggest cars ever times.
Bridges are probably breathing a sigh of relief today because it's all fiberglass out there. But it's funny, and you got to wonder if some of the inspections were that are going on today are
mm-hmm.
kind of glossing over some stuff because it's like, well, they're handling all this weight now, or all these cars now, blah blah blah. But it's like, well, they're still the cars are lighter now. But you still need to do your diligence.
Well, they had that thing in Missouri, that bridge failed not too long ago, and that was it. Missouri,
Minnesota, was that?
It was a state that started with M.
So
that is outside of what we do here. You have to listen to Bridge Inspection Podcast to find that out,
or the news,
neither of which will we be.
So yeah, I mean. The bridge collapse basically started a government inspection program to make sure
mm-hmm.
our infrastructure was intact, which is going swimmingly these days, you guys.
Yeah,
really is
really on the ball.
But anyway,
is that a pun?
Really on the ball?
Swimmingly.
Oh, swimmingly. So no.
Womp
People. It wasn't long after this people started drawing a correlation between the Mothman sightings and the Silver Bridge collapse, because no more sightings after the 15th.
See, now that fascinates me, because I also saw that. I also saw that in the doing my mm-hmm. personal research into the subject. Sure. But I drew the exact opposite conclusion. I mean, I would think that it would be more inclined to say, oh yeah, no, there's this thing, and then we saw a ton of Mothman after that thing. Like he was around in the area. This was the Mothman times. I feel like after the bridge, any community that has something traumatic and awful happen to it, you got better things on your mind. What used to be a fun thing to discuss, suddenly now people are dealing with very real loss, very real issues. Even if they didn't lose anyone, their neighbor did. I think that just locks a community down and maybe makes people less inclined. Now, maybe there were still Mothman sightings, but in that
getting reported,
in that environment. Do you really, when people are going to funerals and trying to arrange for all these things, do you really say, "Oh, I saw the flying Mothman"? Probably
kind of
not.
takes a back seat.
Right. So
that's a great point.
And I don't necessarily think that confirms or denies it. And I've read, and just in the things that I've read about, I've read a book or two about it, that people considered the Mothman as a harbinger, and people have even tied him into some Native American legends.
Oh yeah,
and in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah.
That this Mothman, this dark figure, is a harbinger of ill omens, of things. Yeah, exactly, of disaster, of bad things coming. So is that exactly what was happening here? Do you think? I mean,
that's a great point. I think that, I mean, with you saying that, I just picture like people who are obviously grieving and just stricken with bereavement, and then the Mothman's like, it's horrible to say, this is what I'm picturing. The Mothman's peeking into the window. He's like, guys, come on, Mothman here. And then, like, he's just turning around. He's hunching his winged shoulders, and he's like, the Lonely Man theme starts.
the piano music from the Hulk starts. And he just has to walk down the road.
Hitchhike down the road. Yeah, I'm not trying to make fun or anything. I'm just saying that's with you saying that point. It's like maybe the Mothman's like, well, I'm no longer the fad here, so I'm out of town.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a mass, not mass hysteria, but just a thing that people were doing, and I think that there are plenty of reasonable. I mean, I don't think any of them are locked down, but reasonable explanations. Large waterfowl, for example, herons, large birds. Especially in an area that has a toxic ecology.
Oh yeah,
birds are exceedingly sensitive to those sort of environments. I mean, this is also the silent spring times. This is DD teeth and eggshells, and this is before those things got really locked down.
Yeah,
obviously, I guess it would be a reach for me to blame DDT, but the only thing I will ever blame DDT for is the near eradication of malaria. It was a magnificent chemical. But that's a discussion for a future episode. But no, it was a toxic environment. This thing was seen primarily in the region of, and it did expand after that. But I think that you could psychologically explain that.
Sure.
I don't think it's unreasonable to say this was a large bird, perhaps somewhat deformed, maybe of an unusual coloring for the species.
Yeah, they got some experts down there to try and explain this scientifically. They don't want to hear anything about monsters and phantoms and all that junk. They want to hear about science from somebody who went to college.
Right.
So
we're going to put aside our usual prejudice against your learning because
we need you. They got somebody down there who explained this could be a large sandhill crane. Sandhill cranes have a red coloring on their head, right between their eyes, kind of thing. Could be, who knows? If it's hit, with the light, it could give off some kind of glowing redness to it. But the thing about that I think the mutation thing is great. That's one of the things. Who knows what's going on in that swamp with the TNT, because it's primarily seen in the TNT area there. It could be some kind of mutation of something, because like I said, some people describing it's kind of looking like an owl. These cranes, they grow to 6 feet, at sometimes, the bigger species,
the examples.
The examples of the alphas. But who knows, man? The sandhill crane, when I see pictures of it, it's got a long neck still. Mm-hmm. And there were very few reports of it having a neck at all. That's the only thing that kind of snags that argument up to me, anyway.
There are a lot of other interesting things. I think what bolsters the case for a genuine paranormal event are actually not necessarily all the direct observations, but the indirect ones. The static on the radio, that wasn't an isolated thing. That happened in several places. People's TVs, in a lot of those discussions about people seeing the Mothman on their porch, their TV went out. I mean, again, this is the 60s. This is a very nuclear family time. People are glued to that mofo. The TV goes out, their attention diverts, and that's when they notice this thing on the porch.
Right.
And I in a lot of the reports that I'd read, that's kind of the flow of it.
Right.
So there is some sort of EM thing that's happening.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. What's interesting is that, especially in the case of the police radio, it seems to be a semi-permanent effect. Like, this thing can affect an area, leave the area, and that effect stays. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
The secondary effects on people's physiologies.